I studied hard and like a lot. All right, thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more Jax Japan content, and I'll see you later. Okay, for real though, it actually took me about 4 years, hundreds of hours of studying, and 3 tries, but I finally was able to pass the JLPT N2 certification last summer when I was still living in Japan. No shortcuts, no magic tricks, no secret apps, just consistent effort. If you're serious about studying Japanese and passing the JLPT, I'll share exactly what worked for me, what didn't, and how you can realistically pass the JLPT without burning out. Let's get started. I first started my journey of learning Japanese back as a freshman in college in around 2018, when my love for Japanese culture naturally sparked into wanting to learn the language, as it does for a lot of people that take that leap to learn Japanese. I'd never been to Japan or really had any Japanese friends or anything like that. And I actually started because some of the friends I had at the time that were obsessed with Japanese culture were also learning the language, and I thought it would be a cool and maybe neat hobby to pick up. Little did I know that learning Japanese is neither a hobby, nor is it something that is necessarily fun, so it kind of fizzled out pretty early on. So technically I started learning Japanese about 8 years ago, but I'd say that those first 4 years were pretty off and on. I'd study a little bit of the Genki book, which is kind of everyone's beginner Japanese textbook. Maybe make a few flashcards, learn a few kanji, learn a few vocab. I took a beginner course at my college at one point, learned how to read and write hiragana, kind of the intro stuff, but that's it. However, it did give me a solid base with learning some easy grammar and a few keywords and phrases that kind of stuck with me forever. It wasn't until about 4 years ago when I decided to take the leap to apply for the Japan Exchange teaching program. And that's when I got really serious and decided to take a shot at trying to be fluent in Japanese. I mean, I was going to be living over there soon, so might as well put my all to try to learn the language. No more half measures. If I'm going to do it, I'm going to go all in. And the ultimate goal for many learners of Japanese varies from person to person. But mine at the time was the much sought after and the much elusive JLPT N2 certification. If you clicked on this video, you'll probably know what the JLPT is, but if you don't, the JLPT stands for the Japanese Language Proficiency Test, and it is the baseline official standard for testing proficiency for the Japanese language, and is recognized by the Japanese government, by universities, by companies, basically anything, and is the gold standard for Japanese proficiency tests, and is really the measuring stick for all Japanese learners. It's usually the first question that you ask if you meet someone who's learning Japanese. What level are you in the JLPT? It's basically the Japanese version of TOEIC for English learners. It's broken up into 5 levels from N5 to N1, with N5 being the lowest level and N1 being the highest level of Japanese proficiency, and each level having a fairly substantial gap in between them. But really what they represent in regards to fluency are very different. In my mind, they're really broken up into 3 major categories, with N5 and N4 being beginner level Japanese. Basic greetings, basic conversational level, maybe be able to order food at a restaurant, things like that. And being able to read basic hiragana, katakana, and maybe a few kanji. And then there's N3 in the middle, which is the intermediate level in my opinion. If you reach this level, you're usually able to hold down decent conversations and interact comfortably in daily life or while traveling across Japan. And maybe you're able to order a complex drink at Starbucks. And then there's N2 and N1, which are the advanced stages of Japanese proficiency. Reaching this level allows you to express advanced thought and ideas, be able to agree and disagree, and even debate in conversations. You can read more complex stories, be able to pick up a Japanese newspaper and read it pretty easily, read and respond to work emails, read kanji pretty fluently, and understand keigo and kenjogo and when to use it and when not to use it, and to be able to keep pace with the natives in conversation. These are where you get into what really matters if you are seriously considering living and working in Japan, and using Japanese as part of your daily life and at work. To be honest, think of N5 to N3 as kind of just for fun, just measuring sticks for your current progress, while N2 and N1 are where the big boys come out to play. But out of all the levels of proficiency, the most sought after is N2, for what it represents. Holding N2 proficiency means that you can apply for most jobs at Japanese companies, apply for graduate programs at Japanese universities, and be overall recognized officially as someone who quote-unquote understands Japanese. Not that passing N2 means that you are necessarily fluent in the language, but I'll get to that later. And not to say that N1 isn't important either. It's just usually not required for the things that I've listed before. And even a lot of Japanese will tell you that the material that shows up on the N1 test isn't necessary to really know the language. And being N2 level is more than enough to show that someone can understand the language and is committed to learning and developing their Japanese. However, if you hold the N1 certificate, you can really get a leg up in those job applications or university applications, as the gap between N1 and N2 is still pretty large. So that means if I hold N2 certification, that means I'm fluent, right? That means if I do nothing but study and learn how to pass this test, I can live and work in Japan and read books and watch movies and go out with friends and live my Japanese fluent dreams, right? Well, it's not that simple either, as the JLPT has one major flaw in its design, and that is that there is no speaking portion of the test. So it is technically possible to pass all the way up to N1 without ever speaking a word of Japanese in your life. I've never heard of anyone doing that, but I'm sure that is technically possible. So even though I've passed the JLPT and hold N4, N3, and N2 certifications, do I consider myself fluent? Short answer is no, I do not. And really that has to do with what you feel like fluency is for you. I'm someone who sees fluency as basically being almost native level Japanese. And if you've ever watched any of my Japanese podcasts that I put out every single week, then you can tell I'm someone who struggles to speak and create output besides そのウイスキーは美味しいです. So I wouldn't consider myself fluent in regards to being able to work at a Japanese company full-time or anything like that. I still consider myself having a long way to go to get to the goal or place in my mind where I feel like I am fluent. And the reason I even decided to do a Japanese podcast in the first place wasn't to show off my Japanese abilities or anything like that. It was simply just something to force me to use my Japanese and to create some kind of output, and to keep myself accountable by putting one episode out a week so that I could track my progress, see if I got better week to week, and just to force myself to use the language as they often say, if you don't use it, you lose it. And just to get more comfortable speaking in the language as well, which I admit is my weakest area. And that probably has to do with the hours on hours of studying to pass a test instead of immersing myself in practical output of the language. So keep that in mind and really try to understand what your goals are in learning the language and what you want to accomplish when learning Japanese. Everyone has a different goal and specifically what they want to do. My girlfriend, for instance, studies Japanese fairly often, but she doesn't study to try to pass a test. She just wants to be able to have conversations fluently with friends, or use the language while traveling, or just daily life in Japan. So her method of studying is way different than what I did to pass the JLPT. But enough about what the JLPT is or what holding an N2 certification does for you. For those of you who are actually interested in passing the JLPT one day, I want to show you how I did it, what resources I used, and what study methods worked for me. And this might not work for everyone. Everyone has a different style of learning at the end of the day. But I do believe that this is a tried and true method. And if you're willing to be consistent and put the hours in, and at least something every single day, I can guarantee that this will work. Because if it worked for me, I know it can work for you. Me personally, I took the N4, N3, and N2 tests in the span of 2.5 years. I took all of the tests while living in Japan, which was a lot easier since they do the test every 6 months, different than in America, which they only do once a year. I passed N4 and N3 back-to-back in 1 year, and then it took me 3 tries to pass N2. My second attempt at N2, I even failed by only 1 question, which was totally heartbreaking. But I think it was good for me because I think I made it up and ended up getting a very good score on my last attempt to finally pass. All in all, from the moment I seriously consider myself trying to take and pass JLPTs, it took me approximately 3 years of diligent study to get from N5 to N2. The 6 months before leaving Japan, I started studying seriously, and the 2.5 years of actually living in Japan and taking the tests there culminated in me passing N2 and achieving my goal. So let's get into what happened during these 3 years. To the couch. The first step is understanding the test itself. The N2 test is broken up into 2 major sections. The Vocab, Kanji, Grammar, Reading test is all in one 105-minute chunk. Then you get a much-needed 30-minute break before you tackle a 50-minute long listening section, which is true rapid fire and an endurance test. All in all, the scoring is pretty lenient, as you only need to get a 50% in each section to get a passing score. However, don't be fooled because they do purposely throw in questions from any level onto the test. so you could get a lot of potentially N1 level questions on the N2 test. So it really evens out that someone that is at the N2 level will usually score between a 50 to 60% on the test. And if you get much higher than that, say you get a 70 or an 80% on the test, then you may really have a chance to pass N1 at the next time around, because that is a really good score. The test starts out relatively easy, giving you about 10 to 20 really easy vocab and kanji questions that are simply point and click. But it quickly takes a turn with the grammar section as the difficulty ramps up immensely, and some pretty long passages where you have to decode a lot and choose between very similar looking grammar points for each question. And then there's the reading section, which is just an absolute menace, as this section is what really tests how much you love studying Japanese and how bad you actually want to pass this test, as the reading test can be back-to-back page-long reading passages with a few questions for each one that seriously tests your reading comprehension, grammar, vocab, and kanji all in one go. Comparatively, the listening test is fairly straightforward. Still challenging, but if you've trained your ears enough, it should be no problem. So here's my study strategy. I'm going to break it down to 4 main sections: the textbooks I used, vocab and kanji, reading and grammar, and listening and speaking, and the specific resources that I use to round out each one. To the desk. So first I want to tackle the textbooks that I used. And in reality, if you want to pass a test as complex as the JLPT, you're going to need to use textbooks at some point. I really don't know how you would be able to pass the test without them, unless you are just constantly reading and soaking in things that interest you, which can also work. But these textbooks are specifically designed to help you pass the JLPT, and they give you tons of vocab, grammar points, reading strategies, and tons of practice questions for you to master. So I honestly think the quickest way is to use JLPT emphasized textbooks. It may not be the most interesting or fun, but they really worked for me at least. Now, people swear by the Genki books, and I started out using those as well. But those really only take you up to JLPT N4. So when I tried my hand at passing N3 and N2, I decided to go with 2 series of books. You have Sou Matome and Shinkansen Master. They are pretty similar, as they both have different books dedicated to each different section of the language, and they use basically the same study format over the course of the books. However, I have found that throughout my studies that Sou Matome is a little easier to learn and understand, and it's really great for when you first start sinking your teeth on this higher level material. And then once you finish these books and get a good grip on it, then that's when the Shinkansen Master comes along and is really good. There is a lot of overlap between them, but trust me, I think the repetition really helps to learn these very nuanced grammar points and see this very advanced vocabulary multiple times. And the Shinkansen Master gives a more realistic approach onto how the exam will actually be like. Think of Sou Matome as the easy teacher that holds your hand and guides you through the material so that you can understand it as best you possibly can, while Shinkansen Master is that tough teacher that throws you into the deep end of the pool and forces you to swim. But you're thankful for it, because at the end of the day, that was probably the difference in getting those reading questions right on the actual exam. So for people watching this would be my textbook recommendation to get from N5 to N2. I would say start with the Genki series to get your feet wet in the language and to learn the basics. Then once you finish that and you pass the JLPT N4, then buy the Sou Matome and Shinkansen Master books for the N3 level. Get through those and then pass N3, and then do the same thing for N2. Get through both of those series and you'll be very prepared to pass N2. And one day when I do decide to take and pass the N1 exam, I'm going to start out and do the same strategy. Get the Sou Matome books and then do the Shinkansen Master books before the exam. But there's much more than textbooks that you need in order to pass the JLPT N2. So let's get into each category and look at some other things that I used in order to strengthen and round out my proficiency in the language. Now, the first step when tackling the massive amounts of kanji and vocab is to get a system where you can keep all that you've learned and review them regularly. I use Anki, and I think that is the best spaced repetition flashcard app that you can find. And you can customize it to be able to fit exactly how you want to use it. There's tons of resources out there that will help you tailor it exactly to your needs, so I highly recommend checking those out if you're first getting into it, so that you can maximize your Anki and get the most out of it. When I first started out studying Japanese, I actually used real flashcards because I just liked having a tangible note card in my hand. But that quickly became too much when my vocabulary started getting into the thousands. So Anki is a great system to simulate that flashcard feeling. And doing my Anki review every morning is as routine to me as drinking coffee. Basically, any new word that I would see, I don't care what it is, I would input it into my Anki deck for later. Whether that was from a textbook, from the news, Netflix, travel blog, street sign, or even a menu at a restaurant, I'd look it up and then add it to my Anki later and get it into my review decks. As for kanji, I did try the mnemonics way, such as the remembering the kanji method. I even did the entire book, but it just got a little too convoluted for me eventually. And in my opinion, I think the best way of learning kanji is just through repetition of seeing it in different contexts. Seeing it through common words enough times to recognize the meaning and the connection that it has between different words. And Anki helps with that as well. And the key with building up your vocabulary is really through input. Any way you can, from watching, listening, reading, even writing. It will naturally build up. And then also repetition in context. Anki is great for a reference or a daily review to kind of see vocab, to see kanji. But if you're not seeing those words on a semi-daily basis in context of sentences or in dialogue, it will be forgotten. So isolated vocab lists from textbooks are great at getting the vocab into your system. However, finding places to see and hear these words in context is what really takes you from, oh, I think I've seen that word before, to knowing it and it being ingrained in your mind. Now with grammar, it can get a little more tricky, as Japanese grammar gets pretty tricky at this stage. I also used Anki to remember grammar points that I had learned in textbooks, but as well add in some example sentences so that I can see it in context and maybe get some kind of visual aid to see that, oh, okay, it's used in that way. As there are many Japanese grammar points that just kind of like blend into each other, and you really need to know the difference and nuances of each one. As always, seeing and hearing these grammar points in context is also very important as well. And when it comes to reading, there are many ways that you can go. The easy answer is to just read things that you are interested in. For example, for me, I'm interested in travel, so reading travel blogs on native Japanese websites were great for me to get lots of reading practice in. And that is something that is necessary. However, remember that the JLPT covers a wider range of reading topics. So you're going to need some experience in different genres if you want to be able to pass the test. The textbooks that I mentioned before do give some great reading practice examples, and specifically how to tackle each type of reading passage on the test. But to really round out your fluency in reading, I do recommend two things: online news and novels. Specifically, native online news articles that you can find from NHK or TBS Newsdig really do help for giving a variety of different kinds of readings to choose from. You can read about the national elections, the economy, sports news, recent scientific discoveries, or random cultural topics. And it also helps you keep up with things going on in Japan and help you feel more confident, especially when living in the country. As for novels, this is one area that I never really dove into and kind of regret that I didn't. But if you can find a novel or something that you are interested in, it can really help you understand the structure of Japanese storytelling, which is a lot different than what we're used to in books in English. At the end of the day, the important thing is to never stop reading. At least something every single day, because it really pays off. You need to be at the point on the test where you're not sitting there trying to decode and understand each sentence of a reading passage. 105 minutes is a long time, but these reading passages are long and there are a bunch of them. So you need the time to actually comprehend the passage and answer the questions, not go word by word and try to figure out what each word means in context of the sentence, in context of a paragraph, and in the whole reading passage. You need to be able to read this entire passage, this page-long passage, from start to finish, understand most of it, understand what the questions are talking about, and how to answer it, all in about 2 to 4 minutes. So get reading and don't stop. And if you're someone who hates reading or just really isn't willing to do that, then passing the JLPT N2 may just not be for you. And that's completely fine, by the way. We all have our different goals, and that's why it's so important to understand what goals you have before jumping into something as big and as tedious as studying for the JLPT N2. The listening test can be both the easiest section of the test, but also the most pressure and most nerve-wracking. There is no replaying the tape, and once they play the audio, you only have about 5 seconds to choose and bubble in your answer before they already start the next question, so you really have to be on your game. The good news is that listening resources are probably the easiest to find, and most of them are free. Podcasts, YouTube, streaming such as Netflix are your friend. And the more native level input, the better. There are tons out there, and when it comes to watching stuff on YouTube and Netflix, I would usually watch it with the Japanese subtitles first, so that maybe I could see any words that I didn't know, and then I would watch it again with no subtitles on, so you get both the repetition and the comprehensible input from what you're watching. I would also use a program called Language Reactor that breaks down the sentences and the subtitles in in whatever show you're watching, and makes it so that you can hover over any of the words that you don't know, and it gives you the translation right then and there. This was great for sentence mining and building up my vocabulary as well. But what also really helped me prepare for the test itself was the many JLPT practice listening tests that you can find on YouTube. Each are about 45 minutes to an hour long, and they simulate exactly what the test is like. And in the month leading up to the test, it was crucial to practice these almost every day. And then another great resource that I used to practice listening and also hone my conversational skills was Italki, which is an app where you can have online native tutors of whatever language that you're learning. And you can book lessons at your leisure with a wide variety of styles of teaching and a lot of great teachers that can teach you advanced grammar or just have a conversation with. It can be a bit expensive, however, because even a $5 or $10 lesson can really add up if you're doing them, say, twice a week. But it did really help me feel more confident in my listening skills and my conversation skills leading up to the JLPT exam. Even though the JLPT doesn't test you on those speaking or conversation skills, having those skills can at least give you more confidence that you're on the right track in the language. And then the obvious thing that helps with learning any language when it comes to listening practice is simply hearing it every day, everywhere. I was thankful to be living in Japan at the time of studying for N2, so I did hear Japanese throughout my daily life at least 8 hours a day at work, just in passing. So those were all the resources that I used to study and pass the JLPT N2. Now I'm going to show you my study routine and what I did every single day in order to prepare for and pass the exam. Back to the bar. The first step is creating a study plan and routine that you seriously think that you can stick to, and understand how long you have to take the test, which in my case was a 6-month window between each test. So when studying for the JLPT, each day I would wake up and do my review first, reviewing vocab, kanji, and grammar points using Anki. Then while making breakfast or on the way to work, I would listen to some kind of Japanese podcast or some kind of Japanese radio show or YouTube video in order to get some basic listening practice in. Then when I got to work, which at the time was a Japanese junior high school, I had about an hour before classes started, and after I was done preparing for anything I had to do that day for the classes, I would then read some online news such as NHK or TBS News Dig. And then in my downtime at work, if I had maybe a few break periods in between classes or after lunch, there's usually a pretty long break period in the day, I would study my JLPT practice textbooks. One section for each book, and each one would take about 20 to 30 minutes. So all in all, about 2 hours of textbook study each day. Any other downtime I had at work, say if I didn't have a lot of classes that day, I would usually use by maybe reading some travel articles online, or try reading a book, or really anything to kind of get some more Japanese reading in. Reading comprehension is such a huge part of the test, and the hours put into getting used to Japanese sentence structure and composition is key to getting through it on the test. Then after work, I would usually listen to some more Japanese podcasts on the way home or in the gym, or even while cooking dinner. And then after dinner, for about an hour or 2 hours, I would watch something on YouTube or watch a show on Netflix for some extra listening practice, and sometimes use programs like Language Reactor to sentence mine and acquire any more vocab that I haven't seen before. When you add all of that up from start to finish, that's about 4 to 6 hours of Japanese language study a day. And then there's the month before the exam. The 3 to 4 weeks before the exam is all about taking practice tests. You're going to want to take at least 2 or 3 a week. And by this point, I would replace my textbook study during the day with at least half a practice test if I could. Then on the weekend, I would do a full-on mock exam, put the time aside, take 2 to 3 hours, and do the test like I would do if it was the real thing. All the while, every single night during the weeknights, I would do practice hour-long JLPT listening tests that you can find on YouTube. And those are great because they simulate exactly what the listening test is like and really helps you get used to the format of the questions. So by the time I actually show up on the day of the exam, the past 30 days, I would have taken the test in full about 12 times, and the listening section I would have taken at least 20 times. That way there are no surprises on test day, and then I can just go and perform. I know that's a ton, but it's what worked for me and what I know can really work for anyone. Now naturally, you might hear me talk about my study routine and think, nah, that sounds like burnout waiting to happen. And I'd agree that on paper it does sound like a lot, and even hearing myself say these things, it's kind of like, wow, really, did I do that every day for 6 months. And yes, I did, but not only for 6 months, but also for a year and a half, since it took me 3 tries to even pass N2. But the truth is, it's not that bad when you actually break it down day by day. Yes, what I just laid out was 4 to 6 hours of studying every day, but when you think of it like it's different chunks throughout the day and in different methods, it really is a lot lighter than you think. Really, to me, the only time throughout the day where it really felt like studying was when I had my nose in textbooks, which I think is necessary for a deeper understanding of Japanese grammar and getting used to practice reading questions on the test. Everything else was simply stuff that I'm already interested in, but just doing it in Japanese. So that's what you need to do, is find things that interest you and then learn how to infuse Japanese into that. Now, on the day of the test, you may feel like you're back at school, as it is eerily similar to taking something like the SATs. It's very highly regulated, very official, and very high pressure. Just try to relax and trust that the last 6 months of studying every day will pay off, and that you've been training for this moment and you'll be fine. Now, a quick tip that I'll give you on the listening test is to not be afraid to speak up when they ask if they want the volume louder. I made this mistake during my second attempt at N2. I was sitting in the far back and I could kind of barely hear what the audio recording was playing, and they asked if everyone could hear it okay. And me, I don't know if I was just in my own head that day, but I didn't, and I ended up not really being able to hear a lot of what was on the listening test. My third attempt, I didn't make that mistake, and I made sure to speak up and make sure that that thing was cranked as loud as it can. And it worked out because I actually got a really good score on the listening test my last time through. Honestly, the test is just exhausting, and I've never been more tired taking a test than I was after taking the N2 test. So reward yourself after. For me, that was a trip to Domino's and getting some beer from the Konbini. And then after that is the long 2-month wait for the results to come out online. And I'll never forget the feeling of finally seeing the words Gokaku on the screen and knowing that those years of hard work finally paid off to something to be able to reach that goal. And beyond taking some test or even learning a language, what that process taught me was the enjoyment of learning and enjoyment of the process and the enjoyment in the journey in anything. We all want to skip to the end. We all want to see the end result quickly. But life's journey towards those goals and improving something every day is what life's enjoyment comes from. I think one day soon in the future, I think I'll make that decision to study and take the N1 test as well and pass that, not for any specific reason besides just a personal goal or maybe personal pride, but that's up to me. I know I don't have to, I know it's not required, but maybe just for my own personal growth and development, maybe I will. But if I don't enjoy that process, if I don't enjoy that growth every day of learning the language to that advanced level, then I probably won't do it, because a piece of paper that says N1 isn't gonna satisfy me more than seeing the growth every single day. When I first started learning Japanese, I truly never thought I'd make it this far. I just wanted to understand the words in the anime I was watching, be able to order food at restaurants, or make sure I could get exactly what I wanted when I went to Starbucks without freezing up. And eventually my goal turned into being as fluent in the language as I possibly could. And the truth of that is that that goal doesn't have an endpoint. That goal doesn't have a past result. Learning Japanese is a constant journey and a constant process. You have to enjoy it and keep going every day. And if you don't enjoy it, then it won't last. It's just that simple. And there were times I didn't enjoy it in the moment, but I kind of knew that I was working towards something, so that kind of helped my motivation. Sometimes it was boring, but every day, even when I didn't feel like it, I showed up, studied a few kanji, studied a few vocabulary flashcards, read a few news articles, listened to a podcast, watched a video, did something. And that's what got me here. Not some genius study method or secret app that teaches you everything in 6 months. Just time, consistency, effort, and actually enjoying the process of learning. So if you're watching this and you think, oh, I'll never reach into Japanese is so difficult, I'll never reach whatever goal that I have. Trust me, I've been there. You absolutely can do this. It just takes something every day. The trick isn't to study harder, it's to study longer. And I don't mean longer as in study 5 hours in one day. I mean longer as in studying something every single day. Something that's part of your life instead of something that you just do. Because one day you'll look back and realize that you've gone from memorizing a few hiragana to reading full-on news articles and holding down conversations. And that's one of the best feelings in the world. So keep going. Your progress might feel slow, but if you stay consistent, you'll get there. I promise. Thanks for watching, and let me know what study methods or resources that you use to enjoy the process of learning. Stay tuned for more Jack Japan content, and I'll see you later.